Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us again today. I'm Keith Tebow from FRC Media. We have been using a lot of our time here to get ready for the election of 2020. And one of the races that we're following closely in Fall River and in the Massachusetts 4th Congressional District is the seat that's going to be vacated by Congressman Joe Kennedy. There are 11 candidates running in the race, 9 Democrats and 2 Republicans. I'm pleased to be joined now by one of those Republicans running in the race. I'm pleased to be joined by David Rosa. David, how are you? Thanks for joining us.
I'm great this afternoon, and Keith, so thank you so much for having me on board. Thank your audience. And I'd like to start it off with God bless Donald Trump, our president, and may we get another 4 with him and vanquish the deep, dark state.
All right. There may be some people who don't know much about you or anything about you. One of the things that I do know about you is you're a Fall River boy. So tell us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to run.
Well, with regards to Fall River, I did live in Fall River for about 12 years. I went to a grammar school in the North End, St. Joseph's, and then I went on to Diamond Regional Vocational School, which the concept of vocational schools and vocational training is a bit of a hot topic today. And here I am at age 66, having gone through that process and having some understanding of the value to the individual and to the community and beyond. So yes, Fall River was the place where I was introduced to politics and voter fraud and voter suppression and a lot of things that are kind of hot topics today. So Fall River is kind of where I cut my teeth on politics and some of the unscrupulous things that go along with them.
So now I believe you live in Dighton, right, which is nearby.
Yes.
All right. And one of the things that I talked about with the 9 Democratic candidates is how they're all from that northern part of the district, and you're from our part of the district and in Fall River. Do you think that'll help you at all?
I think what'll help me is all the nonsense and misguided and wrong behavior of BLM. And how it's embraced by the Democrat candidates. They're Marxist. They're hiding behind a great slogan, and they're causing a lot of disruption and fear in the community. I am not a Marxist, and I do not support that sort of violent civil unrest. And I think that's what's going to help me. I could say a little bit more about the Democrats and their challenges up north, but perhaps one of the things that's going on here, one of the dynamics in the background, there are a lot of Democrats who crossed lines 4 years ago to vote for Donald Trump. Many of those Democrats today may look out at the array of Marxist candidates they have before them on the ballot and not be happy. I have an answer. They can go, if they have to, get their Democratic ballot, and they can go to the bottom of the list of those Marxists, and they can write in a great American, a good American, a veteran, someone who's been devoted to it all my life, and we'll talk about that later. And they can write in Dave Rosa Dighton, Dighton, Dave Rosa Dighton. Write that in at the bottom of the list of candidates running for Congress on your Democratic ticket, and we will change the world. And that's the behavior of real rebels.
So let me ask you, David, in terms of the campaign, and I want to get to a number of issues that have been brought up throughout the campaign, and I'm sure we'll also give you the opportunity at the end to bring up anything you'd like that we may not have brought up. But is there one issue that you're really passionate about and why you decided to run that, I want to do something about X if I'm elected to Congress?
Well, absolutely, and it has to do with the economy. A few years ago, we had Barney Frank. And in my view, he entered into unholy alliances that brought us down the path of really what your Marxist Democrat nominees describe as a great depression here, and certainly felt throughout the 4th Congressional District. So having the wrong person sitting as a congressman in this district can having a whopping effect, not only on this district, but across Massachusetts and in many other states. And as a result of that Great Depression that was set into motion by the behaviors of Barney Frank, many families lost their homes, their savings, and the real estate bubble was a great hardship. It took us 8, 9, 10 years to work out of. It's still having a negative effect on us. We cannot afford another liberal or right or extreme left-wing person holding this seat. We need somebody who's stable, has common sense, will work well with both sides, and will evaluate things on their merit, not on political philosophy, but on their merit and their value to the people of the 4th Congressional District, their value to the people of Massachusetts, and very importantly, evaluate any legislation on its value to the United States of America and its people, all of its people.
Let me continue on the economy, if I could, for a moment. Prior to COVID-19, the economy was moving along well. Unemployment was low. Stock prices were at the highest. The stock market was at the highest it's ever been. Do you think that there's a possibility that this can turn around, and can this be held against the president because of the pandemic? Some people are still doing well in this economy.
Well, it's the whole mess is shocking from top to bottom, inside to out, and it's I'm sure it's some political parties and philosophies are taking full advantage of that. Some are trying to deal with it as best they can. It has been politicized. It's not. It is a very real concern. It's perhaps overplayed, but that's not a reason for us to not take reasonable precautions. We should take precautions that we feel relate to our personal place in life. If we have seniors in our lives, or we have underlying health conditions and we feel it's appropriate for us to wear a mask, then please do. Take precautions appropriate for your circumstances. Now, having said that, that's very different than shutting down the economy. Yes, we should encourage everybody to take precautions, but shutting down the economy. Let me try and frame it this way: the people who argue frequently, I've noticed, who argue for shutting things down are people who are getting a government check, and that government check keeps coming no matter what happens. They are not going to lose. They're not going to be behind in their mortgage, possibly lose their home. They're not going to be behind in their rent, probably have a rent issue with their landlord. They're not going to lose their job, which is so important to something they've worked on and cherish, and I look forward to going to. So all of these things, we need a balanced approach. And I really think that a lot more emphasis could be put on volunteerism. We can ask people to voluntarily take precautions, think about their neighbors, think about the people that are at risk. And I think we could put a lot more emphasis on that. And I think Americans respond to the request for help from their neighbors. Let's give them that chance.
Whenever there's an issue, we look at 9/11 and we look at other big issues that have shaped our country. People look for leaders to take a role and to take people to where they should go in terms of getting through any crisis. Is your philosophy that people should just be able to handle it on their own, and if there are consequences, that is part of the freedoms that we enjoy here?
Well, certainly that's part of the dynamic. However, what I just said was that the leadership could take the stance of encouraging people to take precautions that they feel necessary for themselves, and the leadership could reach out to the rest of the community and say, hey, it's great to be young and healthy, or maybe you're a little older and you're very healthy. Maybe you don't feel threatened by this, and that's great. But other people do feel threatened by it, and let's try to take that. Lead the way in setting the example of being a good neighbor. Let's help take precautions, like when you go to the grocery store. If you do not have a health condition that interferes with you wearing a mask, be kind, be considerate. Voluntarily put on that mask. You shouldn't have to put it on because someone is passing a law or an ordinance or taking over by some emergency mandate. You're practicing good precautions because you're a good American, and the leadership has asked you to stand up to that.
So is there a point during a pandemic like we're going through where there may be a need for government to step in and take stronger control? Or do you feel that we would never get to that point? There's no scenario that you can see that would ever happen.
Well, I'm not going to say there's no scenario. I'm going to say I think we're pretty far from that scenario. We've had a lot of health crises and challenges in this country, and we've taken a lot of different steps to deal with it in different times. But following the science, following the numbers, I don't think we're there yet. And so I think we're far away from that just yet. That doesn't mean it's, don't take anything off the table. That's just not what we do.
Right. So how do you feel the administration has handled the COVID-19 pandemic? A lot has been put onto the states. How do you think the president has handled the pandemic?
Well, it should go to the states. The governor should step in, and they shouldn't be sending senior citizens who are infected back to senior citizen homes where they can infect others that are, clearly we've learned that at risk. However, having said that, during the course of this thing, we've learned some hard lessons. And today we can adjust for those hard lessons. So it should go back to the governors, and the governors should learn from the lessons as quickly as possible and apply those. But they also have an obligation to be the leaders that they were elected to be, to ask for that volunteerism, to use that, and also to encourage people to take precautions where they should. But putting down your foot on everybody's neck is not the American way, and it's not the right answer. And we certainly haven't reached the numbers yet that suggest we're anywhere close to that.
I want to get to some other issues before we're done here today. First, of course, there's still a lot of strife. You mentioned it, Black Lives Matter across our country, racial strife between minorities and others in our country. What are your thoughts in terms of movements in Massachusetts as well as other states and maybe even federally about instituting police reform?
Well, police reform is like reform in any other industry or practice of anything. Every once in a while, those who are in charge of it have an obligation. Matter of fact, it should be ongoing reviews. What's happening out there in the field, whether you're in the medical world or the law enforcement world, or you're head of the T in Boston or whatever, or there should be this sort of ongoing review. That's why we elect people. That's why they're there every day. That's why we have administrations, and they should be checking the temperature of the water all the time. Now, there's a lot of data and statistics on police and what happens out there, and that should not be something that's just paperwork in a drawer someplace. That should be something that's under review. And hopefully police chiefs in every city and town are talking to their mayor or their city council, and they're saying, we've seen an uptick in this sort of behavior. We're taking measures to correct it. This is what should be going on. So this movement where widespread civil mayhem is allowed to run amok is got to be brought to a halt.
Moving on now, President Trump has been trying for his 3.5 years in office to try to weaken or even overturn Obamacare. What are your thoughts on that, and what type of health care do you think we should have in place to make sure that as many Americans as possible are covered?
Well, some would argue everyone's covered. Go to the emergency room. I'm not. I don't want to be that callous. Healthcare is important. At my age, I found out, how important a dental plan is, which, doesn't really come with Social Security and whatnot. And, and it doesn't come with my retirement plans. So, clearly I've been bitten by the expense of say, dental care. And by the way, I've had some very serious medical issues over the past 6 years, things that threaten my life. And thank God I had the plans in place that through my employer that stood up to the test. I had to pay some out of pocket. And so I have a deep empathy for anyone who doesn't have either a medical plan or a medical plan that's not really covering all the bases. I'm sure there's an answer, and I'm sure we're going to find it. But that answer should not come from political philosophy, Marxist regime, or socialist regime. That answer is probably best emerging from free market enterprise. And I think we'll find a way through this. I think we'll find a way to cover all, maybe not all, but most of our citizens. And, I think we'll get there. But it's going to take time. I mean, after all, even the Democrats, Nancy Pelosi said, oh, we have to pass it to see what's in it. How irresponsible is that? How irresponsible is that? And that's not what we need. We need the experts to step in. We need careful calculation. We need to measure this very carefully, and we will find our way through it as we have so many other challenges.
Outside the discussions that are going on right now in terms of education and students going back to school, the president is very adamant about making sure that students in the fall are back in the classroom. And I think a lot of people want that to be the end result. There are some issues there that, are related to COVID-19. But in general, is the federal government doing enough to fund education? And that goes to both, K through 12 and also supporting some of our public higher educational institutions that we have in Massachusetts and other states.
The funding of education has grown for as long as I've been alive that I can think of. I'm sorry if I missed something there, but funding for education has grown steadily, and right now, with in some places they need a lot more help. Funding should be somewhat influenced by what sort of performance measures are being taken, and what is that telling us about the performance of the students. However, leadership has a responsibility to look the students right in the eye and say, who's responsible for your education? You are. You're the most responsible person for your education. We've found out we can spend to the moon and not hit the target. However, if we go to the individual and say, look, it's on you. And I did that with my children when they were growing up. I said, every day you show up in high school, you're fighting for your place in college. Don't ever forget that. If you don't want to pay attention in high school, that's fine. That's up to you. But when it comes time for college and I see poor grades, don't ask me to find some way to get you into college. I won't do it. So that was the sort of standard I applied with my own children. And I think that we all as a society and leaders in our community, leaders in the education process, need to remind the students they are first and foremost responsible for their education. It is up to them to pay attention and behave in the classroom. Now, after that, there's always room for improvement. We'll find those places that need improvement. We'll direct the funds accordingly. And, I think we do a great job of education and we have for many, many years. And we have a population that reflects that. Now, secondary education, you go to college, I think we're wasting some money there. Apparently, if you can send young people to college and they come out as Marxists, I would say somebody's wasting their money. Worse than that, you're spending your money to do the opposite of what anybody ever intended to have come out of that. And I say that understanding that when people are young, the heart may rule their mind in terms of political philosophy, but most people get by that and they understand when they get the first paycheck and they see the taxes taken out, they begin to change their mind. That doesn't mean we lose our heart. It means we begin to understand the world differently.
One of the things that President Trump was able to pass with Republican Congress was a tax cut for all Americans. That is still in place. Democrats will say that even though people are getting tax cuts, there's still a disparity between those in the higher end of the wage scale and those on the lower end. Do you feel there is such a wide disparity? And if there is, how can we close that gap?
Well, I'm not a tax expert, and the only taxes I apologize for saying that, but the first taxes I'm concerned about is the ones that I have to pay, and I'm not really concerned with the president, what his tax returns look like. However, the tax program, as I understand it, was applied evenly across the board. So the problem that the socialist, Marxist Democrats are trying to make hay out of is that when you do that, the people who pay the most taxes appear to get the greatest break, which, if you apply it fairly, that's what happens. However, that doesn't mean that there could be some recalibration there. We could make adjustments. I don't know if some people use the term a little bit loosely. It's means testing, whatever. And I'm sure there's some adjustment that could be made when you get to the upper stratosphere of income levels. And I'm not sure a lot of those people would really be upset if we made slight variations when we got to their level. There's a lot more to be said about federal taxes, though, and how they came into being and who they were initially pointed at. It was the federal taxes came into being to be a tax on the rich. And it was set at a certain level, I think about $15,000, and it never was recalibrated. It was never recalibrated. So we maybe we should go back to the beginning and say, what was the intent? And then what would it look like today if we maintained that same viewpoint of it? But go ahead, Sam, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. In all the interviews I've had with the candidates thus far, a lot of these issues we've talked about, taxes, education, healthcare, they tend to be on a lot of people's minds because, again, that's our own, as you mentioned, taxes are important to you. Healthcare is important to other people, education to others. But as a congressman, you're also going to have to deal with foreign policy issues. How do you feel the president has handled those, and how would you make any changes to foreign policy?
I have to tell you, I think, let's keep in mind that Donald Trump, our beloved president, came from out of really the business world, but he did have a lot of interaction with political figures, often helping Democrats with donations to their campaigns. But he also had a chance, because he was in business, to see how business was affected by political agreements, if you will, with foreign countries. And long ago, and we can turn back the tape, he began to notice a disparity that was not helpful for Americans and not helpful for America. Now, one of the things that President Trump has done that I think was long overdue was sort of the fair share in paying your defense bill for European nations and others. You want us to defend you, you better jump in and stand with us. And I'm a veteran. And I have great appreciation for the concept of anybody who joins me on the battlefield to be fully committed.
I want to get a little into now the campaign itself. September 1st is the state primary. You'll be running in the state primary. The Massachusetts legislature and the governor has signed a bill that will make it easier for people to vote in the face of COVID-19, more mail ballots, if you will. I know the president has been critical of that move. How do you fall?
Well, I did receive mine, and I did look it over very carefully. And I have a question for you and your audience. Who are the three major or largest group of voters in the state of Massachusetts? Probably in many other places as well. And because we don't have that interaction, I'll try and help you along with your answer. So it's Democrats, Republicans, and what's the other group? It's independents. We call them, technically, they're unenrolled in a major party. However, if we ask them, if we get out on the street, which I have a lot of experience with doing, by the way, that's how I got the signatures from my nomination papers. I went down and it was person-to-person event by and large, unlike some candidates who relied on e-signatures, had to be woken up from their nap and said, hey, we can get you on the ballot. We'll use e-signatures. Disgusting, in my opinion. However, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there. I was so
No, we're just talking about the institution of more mail ballots this year.
All right, so the mailing ballot doesn't, I'm sorry. So the mailing ballot doesn't do a very good job or any job of talking to a very important group, the unenrolled so-called independents. So when you're out there talking to them, for instance, if I walked up to somebody when I was doing some campaigning in the street and getting signatures for myself and for petitions and for other candidates, I might ask, are you a Democrat? And they would say, yes, I'm a Democrat. And they might have other things to say. Or they might say they're a Republican and they might have some comments. Or they might say, oh, no, I'm independent. Well, you will not find the word independent on that invite to ask for a ballot to be sent to your house. I think this is a form, I would argue, in my opinion, that it's a form of voter suppression. You are not speaking to these people in the language that they understand, that they use, that's important in their mind. In their mind, they do not think of themselves necessarily. Some do, and I don't want to, sort of understate the case in terms of how many do, but for many, they'll say, "Oh no, I'm an independent," and they might go on and say a few words after that. But nowhere on that invitation does it say, if you consider yourself to be an independent, but you're really unenrolled in a major party, then you and the primary are in the position of asking for a Democrat or Republican ballot. There's no language in there at all. So in my mind, in a very odd fashion, in a voter suppression mode, it disenfranchises many people who think of themselves as independents.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I want to ask you.
I'm sorry, sir. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say I've got two quick questions to ask you before we're out of time. First of all, one of the other issues that a lot of people are really in some ways disenfranchised from the process is the partisanship that we see in Washington. The Democrats and the Republicans, they don't. There's not much bipartisanship anymore. If elected, how would you like to bridge that gap?
I'm going to have to take that on head on. I mean, this is not about a division between your traditional Democrat and I dare say maybe your traditional Republican. I'm not too sure about that. But I am a little more certain about on the Democratic side of the fence. They've clearly, if not outright stated, painted themselves as Marxists. This is not a bridge you can cross politely. I'm former military. I have been deployed in a combat zone. I have been in this discussion. I studied in college. I am quite familiar with this. And I know when I hear the language of a communist or a Marxist, and I know when I'm looking at propaganda. So we have a serious problem. And I think one of the ways that may be able to resolve it is I will take it on as my mission to seek out those Democrats who are more moderate, more reasonable, and more American in their thinking. And I will ask them, how can we, get the Marxists out and get the true blue, all-American Democrat back in control of the Democratic Party? That needs to be addressed. And it's not going to be easy, but maybe I'm the guy to push them in the right direction.
All right. Finally, we've got about a minute or so left. David, how can people find out more about your campaign and any last words for the voters of Fall River?
It's having spent some time in Fall River, where my heart is. And I have, 4 years ago, I campaigned across the district. I visited every one of the cities and towns. I've sat in on city council meetings, and I think they all interestingly have a slightly different flavor. It's really interesting, and I've enjoyed it very much. And so you have to, calibrate just a little bit differently for each town. And so I would say, first of all, you need to know where my campaign headquarters are. And they are at 323 Lincoln Avenue, North Dayton, Mass. 02764. Again, the headquarters are 323 Lincoln Avenue, North Dayton, Massachusetts, 02764. If you want to send me a note or maybe a little help, and you will find me on Facebook and you will see a lot of ads. You will find me. My phone number is 774-526-4775. Please note that I didn't hear the other candidates putting out their phone number.
All right. David Rosa, Republican, running for the 4th Congressional District. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. All the best. We'll talk again.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, your audience. I appreciate it very much.
All right. And we want to thank you for joining us as well here at FRC Media as we're talking to the candidates running in the 4th Congressional District. I'm Keith Tebow. Have a great day.